I will lay out the theory and support it with evidence, mostly polls and statistical data, that left-wing ideology is the preferred worldview of the West's current ruling class, and thus dominates its official culture and institutions of power. If I colloquially use the term left-wing, what I mean is what may be classified to be an amalgam of different strains of contemporary social liberalism and/or progressivism, containing in its catechism ideas like a. Strong individualism with the crucial element of so-called self-realization. B. High amounts of tolerance and/or privileging prejudice towards, for example, sexual, racial, or cultural minorities. C. A preference for secularism or irreligion, as well as materialist naturalism as the default mode of looking upon the world. D. Social constructivist theories being regarded as the core foundation for the human condition, including crucial areas like gender, race, nation, or sexuality. E. The real or perceived notion of certain negative intersecting power structures between social groups and the wished for leveling of them. In a later video, I will explain why I think those ideas are misguided, false, or dangerous. Now I will begin to explain what generally defines and, more importantly, divides leftism from its political opposite of conservatism. With that, I do not necessarily mean what each side's respective particular political positions are, but what average character traits one most likely has to have to roughly adhere to either the one or the other of these two certain frames of understanding and analyzing reality. Liberals are equally as intolerant as conservatives. And if I say liberals, it means in the context of this study originating from the US, Schlenker et al. 2012, what Central Europeans colloquially refer to as left-wing, or more accurately, as I have pointed out before, persons who adhere to political positions which are social liberal and/or progressive. Further, leftists, as another American study refers to the same group outlined by me above, Conway et al. 2007, are just as likely to be dogmatic authoritarians as their ideological counterpart. Thus, the idea of the open and tolerant left compared to the narrow-minded and bigoted right is purely myth. But it gets worse, as other US-based studies suggest. The more liberal someone is, again, liberal as defined by me earlier, the more likely they are to unjustly discriminate on the basis of politics. Liberals, again as described above, consistently underestimate the compassion of conservatives and view themselves as more compassionate than they really are, especially with regards to tolerating dissenting opinions. There's also evidence suggesting conservatives are significantly more accurate at predicting the beliefs of liberal-minded, again in the context for this study read leftist people, than vice versa. Once more, The USA reveals an especially bleak picture. In America, Democrats, members of the biggest center-left party, are less comfortable in having a roommate with opposing political views to their own, around 45%, as either independents, that is, the non-party aligned, 22%, or the Republicans, the main center-right party in the US, 19%. Further, US liberals in general, that is again the US leftists, value the lives of black people or foreigners more than that of whites or American citizens, while white US liberals are the only analyzed racial political group that shows an outward instead of an inward group bias. They are significantly more likely to report intense or extremely frequent feelings of tender-heartedness, protectiveness, and sensitivity when considering the circumstances of racial and ethnic outgroup members. This, however, is a very recent phenomenon, only occurring since around 2015. There was a rapid growth from under 20 to around 40% in white liberals who favor affirmative action for blacks in the labor force, i.e. so-called positive discrimination, which seeks to include certain, in theory, underprivileged social subgroups, in practice mostly racialized or gendered ones, in areas where they are underrepresented in contrast to their percentage within the general population, or elevate them where they underperform compared to the average performance of other, more successful subgroups, via preferred hiring, diminished standards, and other similar measures. There also is an increase in white liberals who feel that we spend too little, from under 40 to over 70%, on helping blacks, and that the government should afford them special treatment. There is an increase from 20 to 60% in white liberals who think that white people have too much political influence, and between 1965 and 2000, the percentage of white liberals preferring increased immigration levels never deviated far from 10%. From the mid-2000s to roughly the end of President Obama's term in office, this figure gradually ascended into the 20 to 30% range. As of 2018, it sits at over 50% in total. Some of these changes arguably stem from Trump's rhetoric and policies on immigration, but a glance at the data shows that, as with their attitudes towards blacks, the percentage of white liberals perceiving a lot or a great deal of discrimination against immigrants more than doubled between 2000, 29%, and 2013, 57%, i.e. well before Trump arrived on the scene. Additionally, between 2006 and 2014, the percentage of white liberals saying they feel very sympathetic towards illegal immigrants and their families grew from 22 to 42%. Overall, the leftist spectrum of the political discourse in the US shifted dramatically further to the left than its counterpart towards the right, as shown by the Pew Research Center. The basis for this is their decades-long series of surveys on political key issues like size of government, immigration, corporate profits, or race relations. This data ranging from 1994 until 2017. The results show that while the Republican center moved only slightly to the right over the past 23 years, the center of the Democratic Party shifted far to the left. The same leftward shift can be observed in leftist political parties within Western Europe. For example, in the UK, her major left-wing party, Labour, moved to the left during the same timeframe, almost exactly the same rate as the US Democrats did. While in Germany, all major leftist parties, SPD, Greens, Linke, and moreover, even Germany's largest right-wing party, CDU, from 2002 to 2013, steadily crept left. Research from the US further shows that elected officials are most responsive to the voices they hear from the most. And by many measures, white liberals and Democrats are the most politically active group of all within America, as I will show. For example, white liberals make up 20 to 24% of the general population, but exert a far greater political and cultural influence, for they are more likely to consider themselves activists and are more active on social media. Thus, elected officials naturally hear their demands more often and therefore are more ready to implement them. Their numerical influence on politics and culture also lies elsewhere, in other powerful institutions besides pure politics, but more on that later. All of this is significant because scientists at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute have found that when just 10% of the population holds an unshakable belief, their belief will always be adopted by the majority of society, if they wish it so. And it seems that an ideologically prejudiced and radicalized minority is more than eager to do exactly that. The average leftist mindset seems to fit that description. Bigoted towards dissent to their own worldview, yet unable to even accurately understand these dissenting positions, while being, at the same time, racially and culturally self-loathing, at least if they are white. The enormous increase of radicalization on the political left was very recently, and has, through political and, as we will see, institutional influence outside pure politics, caused by their numerically advantage inside these very institutions, the potential to wield an immense power to shape and control society, and in fact already does so, as I will prove, for this mindset right now, fully or in part, dominates all echelons of authority within the social and cultural structures within the West.